Welcome everybody to the Aurora Show. I'm going to be using this channel for a lot more kind of nuanced, focused videos on particular transits, energetic events, but also like talking obviously about global events as well, and kind of matrix news, if you will, and just kind of like how that's all playing into what is unfolding, right? It's almost like we're coming to this real blend here of the cosmic experience and the human experience. And those are deeply intertwining. And so what I'm going to focus on in this video is the event week. And so that is going to be obviously here in February. I'm calling it the event week, not to be attached to, because I know there's a lot of like rhetoric around the event and like what that means. And is that like grids going down and 10 days of darkness? And like, I don't know, guys. I'm just telling you what I'm like kind of channeling through is that this is the event week. This is a week from February 13th to February 20th, where I believe we are entering a new, it's hard to find the word because it's not a cycle, it's not a chapter. I've been using the word era, and I don't even know if that fully encompasses it, or the word paradigm. What does that mean? But it's a new, like, creational cycle. It's a new cycle of the cosmic human experience. And so it's huge. I'm excited about it. I'm trepidatious about it. Like, whenever we have like really big cosmic events, and again, this is like kind of a once in a lifetime, in a many lifetimes kind of event. You don't know how the cookie's going to crumble. And so, I think the best way to approach this year in particular, and definitely 2027, 2028, which, we'll get to later, is allowing the experience to not only shape us, but I think in this new era, it is a co-creative experience. It is not that the events are happening to us, which has been a lot of what has been marked by the last 26,000 years, as we have felt like the experiences are happening to us. And there's a sense of no control, no authority, no kind of autonomy. We're just swimming with the stream, if you will. And it's also not an era where we just get to do whatever we want. It's all about whatever we decide. It is a co-creative experience. It is kind of a graduation moment, especially for first wavers. In stepping into this co-creative era where we are blending the cosmic experience and the human experience. We are blending, integrating fully the God self and the human self. And that is not really been done before. There's no blueprint for this. And, at the same time, the masses are kind of beginning their journey. We're all beginning a new journey. Let me make that clear, right? That's something that's been coming through really hardcore, is like, even those of you, and those of us will resonate with this. We've been in this game for a long time, whether that be lifetimes, whether that be in this life. Like, there might be a lot of you who have been doing this work and gone through the awakening process decades ago, right? Like, I've been in this now for like 15 years, and it feels like never ending. But we are all beginning a new mission. We are all beginning a new mission. So there's no like hierarchical structure to this. Like, we always say, like, even though you're awakened, you're not really better than anybody else. It's actually a much harder path. But everybody is starting a new journey. So whether that is the final wavers who are just beginning the awakening journey. God bless them. And then you have other wavers in between who have started the awakening journey, the healing journey, the discovery of self journey. And then they're really going to have to elevate into the real work, right? And really diving into all the different aspects that they haven't touched on. And then, you have first wavers who we've kind of dabbled in every genre of this journey. And now we have to kind of enter a new path still, a new mission, which is what are we going to do with all of that experience and wisdom and knowledge? And how are we going to enter this new era with a kind of renewed enthusiasm for it, right? So there's a lot packed into this. And, I've talked a lot of just kind of sharing the historical patterns with the transits we have. Like, I've talked all about that. I've written all about that, about why this Saturn-Neptune conjunction at 0 degrees Aries is really the container of this event week, right? It's going to begin on the 13th and peak on the 20th. Within that week, we then have the Chinese New Year on the 17th, bringing in the fire horse energy. We also have the first eclipse of the year, a new moon solar eclipse at 28 degrees Aquarius, squaring Uranus and Taurus. This is bridging us to a very similar eclipse that was almost at the exact same degree in February of 2018. Now, I can talk all about the kind of logistics and the technicalities of these transits, but what I wanted to do was give it life, like give it a story, so that we really kind of understand the moment. And so the best analogy or story that I have for this is the movie Inception. I am a huge fan of the movie Inception. There's been certain books and movies along the journey that really just gave me the codes, and Inception was one of them. If you've never seen the movie, I do highly recommend it. And if you have seen the movie, maybe this will really make sense to you in the analogy. So in the movie Inception, right, the kind of core premise is that the main character, played by Leonardo DiCaprio, right, he is a master at basically doing two things. One, so he's a master at the dream space, okay? And so the first thing that he is really qualified to do, and that a lot of people hire him to do, right, is to go into somebody else's dream space, meaning their subconscious space, and extract information, right? Because we know that dreams are very tied to the subconscious. They show us subconscious messages. They also can bring us insights from beyond the veil that our conscious self cannot tap into. Also, a lot of dreams are simply where the psyche is trying to process information or wounds or traumas or fears, right, that can be very subconscious. And the dreams are a way to kind of process that. That's where dreams don't really make sense. They're fragmented, they're disjointed, they're incoherent. That's typically when we're trying to process something within the subconscious and the psyche can't hold it anymore. So it expresses itself through a dream, which is really archetypes. And this, this kind of links into things like if you study Carl Jung's astrology, archetypal psychology, it talks about why, we tend to see certain themes in dreams that carry a message. Now, you can also have prophetic dreams, right? That's when we're connecting to something beyond what we're sensing on a daily basis. We can also have dreams that are memories. They are from the past. They are from past lives. They're from another moment in time and space, right? There's a lot that can bleed into dreams. Now, there's also the idea of a shared dream space. This happens if somebody pops into your dreams, like somebody you either know in waking life or someone you know of, right? You could have random people like you don't really know that well. Like it's someone you've seen on social media, or it's someone you kind of are acquainted with, but you're not close with. And these people pop into your dream state. It's an archetype. It's just an archetype. There's an archetypal message there, right? But there is such a thing as shared dream space, where we all do connect in the dream space. We share information with each other. This also kind of brings us into lucid dreaming, when you are aware that you're dreaming and you gain control over the dream, right? So dream space is super interesting. And that's why this movie really popped out to me, throughout the journey. And so Leo can extract information from other people's dream space. He can extract things from the subconscious, right? Secrets, hidden information, fears, like whatever it is that is relevant information. Now, later in the movie, you'll see him doing extraction work, and then he gets hired to do inception work, which is the opposite of extraction. So instead of extracting information, we are planting information. And this movie really encapsulates to me this Saturn-Neptune conjunction at the 0 degrees of Aries. Because the 0 degrees of Aries, we call it the world axis point, right? And kind of a lot of astrologers have written about the world axis point because it is the beginning of the entire zodiacal wheel. And at the 0 degrees, right, the 0 is a circle. It's like the seed, the womb. It is the total beginning of something new that is about to be birthed, right? Which is very Aries. That's why we have the Aries is the first zodiac sign. Aries is often referred to as like the child in evolutionary astrology, whereas Pisces is the old soul. But between those two signs, if Pisces is the old soul, the one who has kind of lived and is now transcending back to where we came from, source, and Aries is the rebirthing of a new incarnation, of a new child, right, of this new essence. Right in between there lies the world axis. So it's where dimensions do blend together. It's where the dream, things that delve in the infinite, in the impossible, in the ethereal world, cross over into Aries, which is the birthing and execution, the living, breathing embodiment of that. That is the 0 degrees of Aries. So I'm calling it the inception point because I believe that it is. I believe that this is where an entirely new creational cycle will be inceptioned. And so what happens in the movie Inception? And this movie is not only relevant to the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, but it also clearly gives us understanding of the past, definitely 15 years, because we've had Neptune in Pisces, right? Neptune is the modern ruler of Pisces. She wasn't even discovered till the 1800s, and she became the modern ruler of Pisces. So when she transited through Pisces, beginning in 2011, we were literally immersed into the dream world. I believe that is like, if you watch the movie Inception, and you can see that they go into layers of dreaming. And, he talks about in that movie, like, basically, let's say we all go into a dream together, right? That's one layer of dreaming. Now you can go down another layer, which is where you're in a dream within a dream. Now in the movie, they go down 4 layers, a dream within a dream, within a dream, within a dream. And the kind of point of that is you're getting down deeper and deeper into layers of subconscious, into layers of things that are so outside of reality, right? And I believe that is what we have been in, right? Like, we have literally gone through so many layers of this dream within the dream of whatever this is. Like, the questioning even of reality became super popular in Neptune and Pisces. Like, is this a simulation? Are we awake? Are we like, what is going on? And the deeper you go into the dream levels, the more unstable the reality becomes. That's what is shown in the movie. The deeper of levels you go down, the more unstable the reality. Things become very volatile. One wrong move and kind of the dream will collapse, right? And if you've ever had this experience, so some of you might, if deep dreaming is kind of one of your gifts or one of your, spiritual skills. I've always been a really deep dreamer, and I have had many dreams. Well, I've had a lot of lucid dreaming, but I've definitely had quite a few dreams where I was 2 levels down, right? So I'm waking up in the dream, like I'm in a dream, and then I wake up and then I realize that I'm still in a dream. And so there's like multiple layers, right? There's also, they have totems in the movie, right? Each person has this unique totem, which is designed to let them know if they're in a dream or not, or if they're back into reality. And only the person with the totem knows how to use the totem, right? And if it's going to tell them, oh, I'm still dreaming, or now I'm awake, right? And that was a really important differentiation that they had to have. And so some of you in dreams might have those kind of totems. Like for me, it was always my phone. In every dream I've ever had, not every dream, but in most dreams, I have my phone. And if there is a moment where I'm kind of recognizing that I need to exit this dream, I will call someone on the phone and I'll wake up. So just interesting things like that, right? And so this movie was like, it clicked for me that we have been down into so many dream levels. And I want to connect this to something larger, right? This is why this conjunction at the world axis point, the inception point, is not just this like new chapter. It's not just like, oh, hey, this is a new cycle. Like to me, this is a new creational cycle, as I said. Like it is the true blending and integration of the cosmic experience and the human experience, which has never been fully done before, except for, way back when we originally inhabited this planet and we were all like divine, right? I want to take this back to Atlantis and Lemuria, the 26,000 year cycle. And there's so many arguments over this, like, follow what resonates for you. But there's so many people that are like, we're still in the age of Pisces, technically. I agree. Like sometimes we have to really look at the technicalities of things, right? And the way that we've discerned what we call these ages, right? The Kali Yuga, aka the Dark Age. Then there's the Bronze Age, right? The Golden Age is what most astrologers or most historians are talking about that we're entering, but no one can really pinpoint a date to it because it goes by the precession of equinoxes. And this is basically the calculation of where the Earth's wobble is at. And essentially every 26,000 and a half-ish years, we move into a different axis and we enter a new age. I know viscerally and inherently, whatever the exact day is, whatever like technicalities we're working off of, we have to go with what we are feeling and sensing, because that is the true reality. And what we are all feeling and sensing is that the next couple of years, again, 2026 is a 1 year. It is starting a new 9-year cycle. We have this Saturn-Neptune conjunction at the 0 degrees of Aries, which hasn't happened for like 9,000 years at this exact degree in an exact conjunction. That's from my research as what people are pegging most accurately, is that this could have happened about 9,000 years ago. It's a fire horse year. We have all the outer planets moving into new signs, which is very, very rare. Hasn't happened in hundreds of years, possibly more than a century. Like, we have to go with what we know on a soul level. Okay? That is what the Neptune and Pisces era literally was teaching us, is that you're not going to have the proof. You're not going to have the facts. You're going to have to know and trust. your feelings, your knowings, and your intuitions, right? We are on the cusp, whether it's already started, whether we're in the throes of it, whatever, we are in the transition or in the beginning of the golden age, the Aquarian age. I think that's going to be super apparent and super heightened when the North Node enters Aquarius later this year, aligning with Pluto in Aquarius. That's a whole nother conversation, but that's one of the reasons why I do believe that the age of Aquarius has actually begun. And that goes kind of to a side tangent, but, Pluto, whenever we discover a planet and we name a planet, we bring that consciousness, that archetype into the collective, right? And so Pluto was discovered in 1930. In 2006, he was demoted to a dwarf planet. Now, there's a fabulous author out there who wrote the book, The Twilight of Pluto. I highly recommend that book. I forgot the author's name, but the book is called The Twilight of Pluto. And he basically talks about how this has happened before in history, where we have discovered a planet and then later it gets demoted to an asteroid, or in this case, what we call a dwarf planet now. And he theorizes that it takes about 30 years from the time that a planet is demoted for the effect on the consciousness to wane out, which brings us to 2036, right? Because Pluto was demoted in 2006. That brings us to 2036, when essentially, and it could happen faster than that, but Pluto's influence wanes out of the collective, right? Pluto being this transformation on a very cellular, visceral level. Pluto is a lot about the power that exists, whether that be corrupt power or whether that be divine power is kind of the questions of Pluto. But basically, Pluto in Aquarius will be the final Pluto transit, if you will, because after 2036, we essentially might not include Pluto anymore as a prominent figure, right? Whether in charts or transits. And so this is the final round. So it's no coincidence to me that it's landing in Pluto and Aquarius. Okay. And the 26,000-ish cycle has come back around. And this takes us back to Atlantis and Lemuria, because in the times of Atlantis and Lemuria, right, there was the fall of Atlantis, when this led to basically what we have today, right? And we could talk all about Atlantis and Lemuria, but what I want to sum up is that the fall of Atlantis and Lemuria, which led to us kind of living in this very enslaved planet, living in this unconsciousness, that was the age of Pisces. That was the dark ages, literally and figuratively. That was the Kali Yuga. And so this brings me back to Inception. So one of the large questions has been, how did we end up like this? Because Earth was the original Garden of Eden. We all came to Earth to have a cosmic human experience, to bring our cosmic selves into physicality and have a cosmically human experience, because in the upper dimensions, you don't have physicality like you do here. It was a treat. It was a playground. There was a reason why Earth was extremely sought after in terms of galactics, right? And so lots happened in Atlantis, okay? I believe that same playbook is still repeating today. But the moral of the story is that Atlanteans tried to take shortcuts to divinity. They are the ones who started this whole thing of like spiritual hierarchy, spiritual ego, genetic modification, biological modification. They wanted to take shortcuts to divinity while not actually going through the organic process of evolution. Okay. And when that fall happened and we were essentially knocked down in dimensions, this is when the parasites of, the the universe, or at least of our galaxy, invaded. It was a vulnerable moment, and it was the moment for takeover. And this is how they've kept control of the planet. Again, Earth is very sought after. It's like a rare gem. They did not want to give up control of this planet. Okay. And so how could they maintain control? Well, they took a lot of the research of the Atlanteans, because there were some Atlanteans and Lemurians that survived, and they used that research to basically figure out how they could modify the human being, control it, and enslave it. Because remember that these nefarious or kind of fallen races, because they have disconnected from source, or were never a part of source to begin with, whether, that's a different discussion. I think there are those races that were actually benevolent, but they disconnected. They pulled out of the source and unity consciousness. And then there's races that were completely artificial. They can't create. They can't create. So, because you lose the creator power, right? And so the only way that they could create or maintain control is if they, A, take over a planet or a species through pure domination and basically enslave the species to work for them. That's one way. The other is to figure out how to manipulate the consciousness so that we ended up creating the world that they can survive in, that they can exist in, which is a low frequency, parasitic hell. But they used us to create that. Our energy sustains this entire spiel. Okay, and this is where Inception comes in. So one of the first ways that they tried and experimented and succeeded at basically hijacking or manipulating the galactic human race was by hijacking the dream machine. Now, the dream machine was a fifth dimensional technology that existed in Lemuria at that time. And you can think of it as like a giant crystal, like, it's obviously a 5D, more ethereal technology, but you can think of it as like a giant crystal that we were all connected to through the heart frequency, through the love source frequency. Okay. And the dream machine was basically, it would emanate source energy onto the planet to make sure that as we're in human vessels, right, or semi-human vessels, we are still connected to source, and that ultimately we could create through the dream machine, right? It would be this almost like co-creative technology where we could make dreams a reality, where we could, because we're used to creating up here in the ether. We weren't so used to creating physically. And so this was a bridge to that. This was a technology in which we all had a shared consciousness. We all shared in these brilliant ideas and innovations, and we were able to create dreams into reality. They hijacked that technology, took over the dream machine, and they began basically performing Inception. They implanted, just like in the movie, right? Leo says, I know that Inception can be done because I've done it before. And in that movie, what happened was he was experimenting with all this dreamtime stuff and creating whole worlds within the dream space. And remember, in a dream, you could be there for like, a year, right? And in waking life, that could just be a day, right? Or 2 days or less, right? A couple hours. So he was experimenting this with his wife at the time. And so they spent like an enormous amount of time in the dream space, like 50 years in the dream space, which might maybe equate to like a week or something in human time. But essentially, he planted the idea because she didn't want to leave the dream space. She didn't want to come back to reality. This is very Piscean, okay? So we have all been living in a dream, and she started to attach to the dream and thinking that it's real, okay? And he planted the idea into her, basically inceptioned her by saying, your reality isn't real. Your reality is not real. This is an illusion. And in order to get her to agree to kind of exit the dream and come back to reality, the problem was once he planted that idea, when she woke up, she still believed that that reality wasn't real because that inception was there. That's how deeply rooted it was this reality isn't real. My reality isn't real. So then she was trying to go back to the dream and ended up, committing. And I just think about that all the time because the hijacking of the dream machine was the first performance of Inception. They planted the first fearful thought that we had ever experienced. Because remember, we don't come from fear paradigms. The first fearful thought: we are separate and not a part of Source. Everything after that has been a consequence of that inception, has been a consequence of us believing that idea. Everything after that we created was based on that premise. And this has led to the Piscean era. And what has led to what we call the ego-programmed mind, which that first fearful thought, because it worked, they started implanting more fearful thoughts, which today make up what is the ego-programmed mind. It's a conditioned program that has become so ingrained, it's in our DNA, that we act and think and exist based on fear, based on linear, logical, analytical kind of computer programming. And so there was a quote from the movie Inception that I felt was really spot on, where one of the guys in the movie, Cobb, he said, what is the most resilient parasite? Is it a bacteria? Is it a virus? Is it an intestinal worm? It's an idea. Resilient, highly contagious. Once an idea has taken hold of the brain, it is almost impossible to eradicate. And that is what we've been dealing with. Again, I'm talking about this Piscean era of the last 15 years just because Neptune has been there and it's been incredibly Piscean. But really, this is 26,000 years. And so if we just take the last 15 years as kind of the epitome of this Piscean Kali Yuga Dark Ages, we have been so deep within a dream. The layers, who knows how many layers they have put us down into amnesia, into deeper levels of dreaming. And I do think that it's relevant of this is why reality is so volatile. This is why it is so unstable, because we are so deep within the fucking dream. And so part of the Neptune and Pisces era of the last 15 years and Saturn's entrance there in the past couple of years was to remember that we're in a dream. That was all we had to do, was to remember that we're in a dream. That all of this isn't real. And so we uncovered layer after layer after layer of illusion. But it was almost like, what do you do with that? Because you're still in a dream, right? And so even though we all say we went through our awakening during that time, we were still in the collective dream. And so this Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries, 0 degrees, the inception point, I believe this is our opportunity to, first of all, reclaim the dream machine. And second of all, decide what we are going to plant this time into the inception arena. If what they implanted was we are separate from God, from Source. We are not a part of Source. We are helpless. We are disempowered. We are weak. We are dumb, powerless, whatever. The list goes on. This time around, Aries being the warrior, Aries being the embodied self, this is when we put back in instead of the original lie, we are replacing it with the original truth. We are God with God. We are walking, breathing, living fractals of God, of Source, of the Mother. And it's time to live it. It's time to live like we are. It's time to walk around breathing and being and acting like that is the truth, and overriding this paradigm of fear and illusion and just helplessness and control and all of these things. This will be a year of autonomy for sure. Like I said, with the fire horse, all that. This is a very special moment. This is like when, and in the movie, after they complete this Inception and everything, he has to go back to his real life and start over. He actually gets to go home and start over. And that's exactly what this Neptune Saturn is. It's like we are all finally waking up from the dream. And now we have to move forward. And now we have to start over. So again, if you guys look at what house this is happening for you in, I think this is really indicative of what your piece of the new mission is, what your piece of this new creational cycle is. And like I said, within that, new moon solar eclipse at 20 degrees Aquarius, that takes us back to February of 2018. Really interesting. 2018 was actually when I began what I felt was my personal mission. And now it seems to be coming back around. So it does, for me personally, feel very visceral in the starting of an entirely new mission. And if you guys are familiar with the Gene Keys, I highly, highly recommend this book. But this is going to happen in Gene Key 30. And the shadow is desire, and the acidic state is rapture. And he basically says if there is anything that is still untried by humanity, somewhere inside someone, the hunger of this shadow will push them into trying it. All possible connections must be tried and tested in order to discover which is the greatest service to the totality. He said, when we see this in a macro way, it almost seems as if nature has conned humanity and we are set up as guinea pigs for evolution itself, which in many ways we are. This is exactly the case, that even though desire in and of itself is a pure impulse of nature, it tends to drive human beings mad. Desire itself is not the problem, but our reaction to it that causes suffering. And he said this will continue to drive you into the world of experience, which of course is what is intended. Nature's con is that we humans cannot escape the fire of our desires no matter what we do. It must be accepted. And moreover, the more you think of desire as unspiritual, the more powerful you make it. And he said the great heretical irony about desire is that the desire to be one with God and the desire to kill your enemy is the same. Both lead to metaphorical hell. His point on that is right, this is where religions come in, or we see all these things going on, all these disclosures and files and things. These people are trying to be God, but they don't have God within them. And so that's what he's saying, this desire to kind of be God leads to the same desire as to harm others. And this leads us to the gift, which is lightness, which he says, basically when you surrender to being a human being, that you are a human being, you are also a galactic cosmic soul, but you are a human being. He said this, you will come to find out that life is just having its game and that we are part of the game, essentially. The moment you see the joke that life must be the way it is, you see your place in the script. This gift knows that desires do not always have to be followed, they just have to be felt. When human awareness penetrates down into the emotional system of this depth, true freedom emerges, which means that desire no longer has an addictive hold on you. We develop a sense of humor. And this brings us to the Siddhic state of rapture, where he says all desires merge back into the primal desire, which is the essence of creation and the longing of life force itself. The divine state of rapture is really akin to being burned by the fires of bliss over and over again. We are allowing our vehicles to deliberately short circuit and burn out the collective desires of the past. And basically this means that a new awareness will dawn. We can easily see it's working its way out of humanity, and the higher your frequency rises, the more you surrender to the divine current. And so what I feel from this is it's saying we have to stop desiring something and simply be it and simply live it. Because the act of desire means we're chasing or we're seeking or we're trying. Instead of just being it, like it says, having a lightness, a sense of humor, kind of re-merging with the primordial desire, which, as he says, is just the pure life force of creation itself. Like creation doesn't desire anything. Creation just is. It's a life force frequency that just wants to express and create and experience. And I think that that has a huge key in terms of that solar eclipse, into really part of this whole reset, this whole, conjunction and this activation of what we're going to do moving forward, as a humanity. So this is a really exciting month. And I think, like I said, we have to just we have to let the fires burn. We have to let the activations come through. Don't try to control them. And really have this optimism that we are ending an era, and sometimes coming out of the dream is startling. And sometimes it is just like a cold plunge that just shocks your system. But ultimately, this is where the real work begins. This is where we get going. This is where I think the reason we all came here was to experience this evolutionary leap together in human form. Like those of us who volunteered to come here, or actually, were chosen to come here. There's trillions of volunteers. We get to live this moment. And I think we should really embrace that, celebrate it, and look at it as this is a once in a billions of years creational cycle moment, and we get to live it and we get to experience it firsthand. And that is a gift. And what are we going to do with that gift? And again, this is a very co-creational time. It's not purely divine will, and it's not purely self-will, but it is, very much intertwined. We are remembering and coming back into the real embodiment of what it means to be a part of Source and a fractal of God, and how that has to shift the way that we operate in this game. So there will be a lot that unfolds. I think, we're just going to have to let it play out, but we certainly do know that the momentum and the fast pace and the action of this year is definitely going to pick up within the next week. And then we will see how this all plays out. And for those of you who are interested in your 2026 transit readings, what I'm looking at is the 4 main parts of the year. So 1, where is the Saturn-Neptune conjunction happening for you in your chart? What is that new path going to be for you? 2nd, I'm looking at April and May, the acceleration months. How that's going to create forward momentum, and then where Uranus transiting into Gemini is going to be happening in your chart. That's going to also become a major player, as well as when the North Node enters Aquarius, right? And this is going to be connecting us to this new moon solar eclipse, where that's going to be happening in your chart, because that's a real destiny pivot. And so if you guys are guided to the 2026 transit readings, I will put the link below for the readings. But yeah, happy Fire Horse here. Happy Saturn Neptune conjunction. I love you all, and I'll definitely be back soon with some updates on some of the more interesting transits that are upcoming.